My daughter-in-law sent me a text that afternoon. It said, "To many people this year, hope you understand." And just like that, I was cut from Thanksgiving. She had no idea I co-owned the very house she was planning to host it in. No clue that I'd been covering their mortgage every single month for the last 8 years. 3 weeks later, she was blowing up my phone, crying and begging, because they were about to lose that house. But by then, it was far too late. My name is Barbara Coleman. I'm 72 years old, and I live in Clearwater, Florida. For nearly a decade, I've been paying my son Michael's mortgage without fail, $2,500 every month, for 8 straight years, because he couldn't afford it on his own. I never missed a payment, never complained, never asked for a penny in return. All I wanted was to be treated like family. Apparently, that was asking too much. That Tuesday in November, I was standing in my kitchen when Jessica's message came in. I had just finished baking my sweet potato casserole. Green bean almondine was cooling on the stove. Cornbread stuffing, made from my grandmother's recipe, was almost done. I'd spent the entire morning cooking, excited to see my grandchildren, excited to spend the day with my son. Then came that text. To many people this year. No apology, no explanation. Just a quick brush off, like I was some distant relative instead of the woman who made their life possible. They seemed to forget something important. When Michael bought that house 8 years ago, his credit was in the gutter. He couldn't get approved for the loan on his own. So I didn't just co-sign. I became co-owner. My name is on that deed. And I've made every single mortgage payment since day one. They were about to learn that when you uninvite someone from your holiday table, you better make sure they don't own the table or the roof above it. Let me take a step back and explain how I got here. Because sadly, my story isn't that unique for women my age. We give, we sacrifice, we support our kids until we're invisible. Before my husband Robert passed 6 years ago, we had a comfortable life. After he died, I used some of his life insurance to help Michael and Jessica get settled. It felt like the right thing to do. Family helps family. Michael is my only child. When he married Jessica, I was thrilled. She seemed polite, organized, maybe a bit controlling. But what young bride doesn't want to run her own home? Things started to shift when they wanted to buy a house in one of Clearwater's nicer neighborhoods. A beautiful 4-bedroom place with a pool, perfect for the grandkids I hoped they'd have. There was just one problem. Michael's past financial mistakes meant he couldn't get approved for the mortgage alone. They came to me looking young and desperate. Jessica was pregnant with their first child, my sweet grandson Tyler. They painted this picture of Sunday family dinners, backyard barbecues, me being the ever-present grandma. Mom, Michael said, "We need you to cosign. We can't do this without your help." I should have stopped at the cosign. But Jessica looked overwhelmed. Michael was stressed. So I made what I thought was a loving offer. "I'll go on the deed," I said. "I'll help with payments until you're on your feet." They were so grateful. Jessica cried. Michael hugged me, said it would be just for a year or two. That was 8 years ago. I never asked them to pay me back. When Michael's promotion didn't happen like he'd hoped, I kept paying. When Jessica chose to stay home with the kids instead of returning to work, I kept paying. When they needed new furniture, a bigger car, expensive preschool for the kids, I kept writing that check. $2,500 a month. Every month. For 96 months. That's $240,000 in mortgage payments. not even counting the $20,000 I gave them for the down payment. But for me, it was never just about the money. I thought I was buying more than a roof. I thought I was securing my place in their lives. I thought I was investing in love. For years, it seemed to work. They'd invite me to Sunday dinners. I helped with the kids. I spent holidays in that house like any proud grandmother would. Tyler and Emma, my whole heart, they knew Grandma Barbara was always around. I picked them up from school, took them for ice cream, helped with their homework. Jessica called me when she needed babysitting. Michael leaned on me when they needed a hand. I felt needed. I thought I was loved. But gradually, things began to shift. The thank yous stopped. The calls became fewer, unless they wanted something. Sunday dinners turned into every other Sunday, then once a month, then just holidays. If I called to check in on the kids, Jessica sounded irritated. If I offered help around the house, she brushed it off. Michael stopped asking for advice, even though I was the one keeping the lights on. Still, I kept paying, because that's what mothers do, right? You don't keep score, you give, and you hope they'll always want you around. I told myself as long as I was useful, I'd have a place, but I was wrong. So very wrong. The first real red flag came 2 years ago, at Emma's 8th birthday. Like always, I offered to help plan and pay. I even brought cupcakes and balloons. But when I arrived, Jessica met me at the door. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Barbara," she said, not quite looking at me. "We've got everything covered today. Maybe just hang out in the kitchen." "In the kitchen," she said, "in the house I paid for." So I spent my granddaughter's birthday washing dishes and slicing cake while Jessica hosted a party for Emma's private school friends. Parents smiled and chatted in the living room while I stood behind the counter like the help. When I tried to join the group for presents, Jessica cut me off. "Barbara, can you help Tyler with his math upstairs? You're so good at that teacher stuff." Teacher stuff. As if 30 years of teaching elementary school was a hobby. But I went upstairs, because at least Tyler still smiled when he saw me. We worked on multiplication tables while I listened to the laughter downstairs. And I started to realize something had shifted. I wasn't family anymore. I was support staff. That pattern continued, and it got worse. They stopped including me in family photos. When they took the kids to Disney World last spring using the money they saved by not paying a mortgage, they posted 100 pictures online. Not one of me, even though I made the trip possible. Michael started dodging my calls. When I did get through, he sounded rushed. "We're just busy, Mom." Too busy for the woman covering $30,000 a year in mortgage payments. But the worst moment, that came this past summer. Tyler had his Little League championship game. I'd been to every game, cheering him on. But when I got to the field, I couldn't find Michael or Jessica. Then I saw them sitting on the other side of the bleachers, with Jessica's parents. There was plenty of space. I walked over, expecting to join them. Jessica frowned. "We're saving these seats for other teen parents," she said, pointing me toward the far end. Alone, far from my grandson's cheering section, Jessica's mother looked uncomfortable. She'd always been kind to me, but Jessica ran the show now. So I sat by myself and watched Tyler play. When he hit a home run, he looked into the stands and waved first at me, then at them, confused. After the game, he ran over to hug me. Jessica called him back. "Tyler, come on. We're going for ice cream with Grandma Carol and Grandpa Jim." Tyler asked, Can Grandma Barbara come too? Jessica replied, Not today, sweetie. Maybe next time. But next time never came. I drove home that day feeling smaller than I had in years. 72 years old, sitting alone at my grandson's baseball game, paying for a life I was no longer included in. Still, I wrote the mortgage check that month because Michael was my son, because Tyler and Emma were my only grandchildren, because I was terrified that if I stopped, I'd lose them completely. So I kept paying, telling myself things would get better, telling myself Jessica was just image obsessed, that Michael was just stressed out, but deep down, I knew. They didn't see me as family anymore. They saw me as a bank account. Then came the final insult. A month before Thanksgiving, Jessica was throwing a dinner party for her neighborhood friends. She asked me to help cook. I was so hopeful. Finally, she wanted me included. But when I got there, I realized my role wasn't hostess or guest. Barbara, could you stay in the kitchen and handle the dishes? And keep an eye on the appetizers. She wanted to focus on entertaining. So I spent the evening in the kitchen of the house I was paying for, rinsing plates and restocking serving trays. At one point, one of her friends came in to compliment the food. Jessica smiled and said, "Oh, that's Michael's mom. She loves to help out. Loves to help out. Not this is my amazing mother-in-law. Not this is Barbara, part of the family. Just someone who liked to pitch in." At the end of the night, Jessica handed me a $20 bill. "For your help tonight," she said. "You're so good at this kind of thing." $20 for making her dinner party possible. In the house I had funded for 8 years. I was too stunned to speak, so I took it. And when I got home, I sat on the edge of my bed with that $20 bill in my hand, and I cried. Not because of the money, because of what it meant. I wasn't family anymore. I wasn't even a guest. I was help. And yet, when the first of the month came, I wrote the check again. Because what choice did I have? If I stopped, they'd lose the house. Michael would struggle. The children would suffer. And I would be erased completely. So I kept paying for people who no longer wanted me around. I held on, foolishly hoping my sacrifice would one day be recognized. But I had no idea the worst betrayal was still ahead. It happened the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. I'd woken up early to start cooking just like every year. Sweet potato casserole with marshmallows for Tyler. Green bean almondine for Emma. My grandmother's cornbread stuffing for everyone. I hummed as I cooked, feeling strangely optimistic. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe the holiday would bring us back together. Maybe, just maybe, Jessica would see me again. I'd even bought outfits for the kids, something special to give them before dinner. The kind of thing I love doing. My phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Jessica. I wiped my hands and picked it up, expecting a question about timing or ingredients. Instead, I read, "Hi Barbara. We've decided to keep Thanksgiving small this year. To many people. Hope you understand." I read it 3 times. To many people. In the house I'd been paying for, after I'd spent the morning cooking, after 8 straight years of hosting holidays under that roof. I set the phone down, my hands shaking. The casserole was cooling. The beans were waiting. The cornbread was crumbling in my palms. I had enough food for a dozen people, and now I'd be eating alone. But what stung most wasn't being excluded. It was the casual way she did it. "Hope you understand." Like I was an afterthought. Like I should be grateful for the heads up. Like the woman who had paid for their home didn't deserve a chair at the table. I called Michael, hoping this was all some sort of mistake. Maybe Jessica hadn't told him. Maybe he didn't know she'd uninvited me. The call went to voicemail. I waited an hour and tried again. Voicemail again. That evening, he finally returned my call. I felt a wave of relief when I saw his name on the screen. Michael, I said, I got the strangest message from Jessica about Thanksgiving. She said things are small this year, but surely she didn't mean I wasn't invited. There was a long, uncomfortable pause. Mom, he finally said, his voice tight. Jessica's parents are coming. Her sister's family too. Some neighbors. It's just going to be really crowded. Double quotes. But Michael, I've never missed Thanksgiving with you. Not once. I've already been cooking. I know, Mom, he said quickly. But Jessica's really stressed about hosting. She thinks fewer people will make it easier to manage. Easier to manage, like I was some chore to be delegated. Michael, I said, my voice trembling. I've been paying your mortgage for 8 years. Doesn't that count for something? Doesn't that at least earn me a seat at your table? Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice was cold. Mom, you can't use that as leverage. We never asked you to pay the mortgage. That was your choice. My choice. They'd come to me desperate, painting pictures of family dinners and backyard barbecues. Now it was just my choice. I'm not using it as leverage, I said quietly. I'm just saying, I'm family. I should be included in family holidays. You are family, Mom, he said. But Jessica's family is here, and it's complicated. Maybe we can do something the day after. Just the 4 of us, the day after, like some kind of consolation prize. Don't Tyler and Emma expect me to be there? I asked. They'll understand, he said. Kids are flexible. But apparently, a 72-year-old mother who had sacrificed her dignity and savings wasn't. I hung up the phone and just sat there, completely numb. This wasn't about one dinner. It was about my place in their lives, my worth to them, my future with my grandchildren. If they could cut me out of Thanksgiving this easily, what came next? Christmas, birthdays, graduations. The next day, I stopped by the grocery store. I figured I'd make a small dinner for myself, nothing fancy. As I pushed my cart through the aisles, I ran into Jessica's mom, Carol. She looked startled to see me. Oh, Barbara, she said, face turning red. I didn't expect to see you here. Aren't you cooking tomorrow? I smiled weakly. Actually, no. Jessica told me they're keeping it small this year. Carol's smile vanished. Her expression shifted from surprise to disbelief, then something close to anger. Small, she said. Barbara, there are going to be 18 people there. She's been planning it for weeks. She rented extra tables and chairs, hired a caterer. 18 people, a caterer, tables and chairs, but somehow no room for me. I swallowed hard. I must have misunderstood, I said, though we both knew I hadn't. Carol gently touched my arm. Barbara, I'm so sorry. I had no idea you weren't invited. If I'd known, it's not your fault, I said, but her kindness made it worse. Even Jessica's own mother could see how wrong this was. But my son, he couldn't. That night, I made the mistake of opening social media. Jessica had posted photos of the house all decorated, the long table with 18 place settings, the catered platters arranged just so, Videos of the kids helping in the kitchen. The caption read, "Teaching the kids the importance of family traditions. So grateful for everyone who will be around our table tomorrow." Everyone, except me. I sat alone in my apartment, staring at those images. The table I helped pay for, the food I used to cook, the smiles of a family I'd poured my heart into. And I realized something I should have seen a long time ago. I wasn't family anymore. I was a monthly transaction, a line item on their spreadsheet, a convenient resource when they needed help, but never someone they wanted around. That night, I cried myself to sleep, not from sadness, from exhaustion. 8 years of trying to buy love from people who only saw me as useful. But when I woke up on Thanksgiving morning, something had shifted. The hurt was still there, deep and raw, but it was joined by a clarity I hadn't felt in years. If I wasn't family enough to share their holiday, then maybe I shouldn't be family enough to pay for it either. It was time to make some calls of my own. While Jessica was bustling around, hosting her 18-person dinner in the house I'd been financing, I sat at my own kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and a notepad. The first number I dialed was my attorney, Richard Martinez. He'd helped me settle Robert's estate and had handled all my legal matters for over 15 years. I knew his office would be closed, but he'd always said I could call his cell in an emergency. He picked up after 2 rings. "Barbara, everything all right?" "No, Richard," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I need to ask about a house I co-own with my son. I've been paying the mortgage for 8 years, and I just got excluded from their Thanksgiving dinner. What are my rights as a co-owner?" There was a pause. Then Richard said, "That's a big question. Are you and your son in some kind of dispute?" I told him everything, the years of payments, the emotional exclusion, the message from Jessica, the dinner party. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he was silent for a moment, then spoke slowly. "Barbara, as a 50% co-owner, you have legal standing. You can stop making mortgage payments immediately. You're not obligated to cover an entire mortgage for a property you only partially own. But wouldn't that hurt their credit?" I asked. "Let me be blunt," he said. "You've been subsidizing their entire lifestyle for almost a decade. From a legal standpoint, they've lived rent-free in your property. They owe you." I sat quietly, absorbing that. I had always seen myself as the helper, the giver, but legally, I was the landlord. If I stopped paying, I asked, what happens? "If they can't cover the mortgage, the house will go into foreclosure. But you also have the right to file for a partition sale. That would force the property to be sold, and you'd collect your half of the equity." He paused, then added, "Or you could buy out their half." "Could they afford to buy out mine?" "Unlikely," he said. "If they can't cover the mortgage, they can't buy you out." I leaned back in my chair. "So either they pay me rent, buy me out, or we sell the house." "Exactly," Richard confirmed. "You've been generous, Barbara. But you're not obligated to continue." After I hung up, I called my financial advisor, Helen Crawford. She had managed my investments since Robert passed, and she always kept meticulous records. "Helen," I said, "I need to know exactly how much I've put into my son's house." She pulled up the files. "You've paid $2,500 every month for 8 years, she said. "That's $240,000, plus the $20,000 down payment you gave them. Total investment, $260,000. What's the house worth now?" Last appraisal was $475,000, she said. And they still owe about $200,000 on the mortgage, I told her. Then there's $275,000 in equity, she replied. Your half would be roughly $137,500. I did the math in my head. I'd put in $260,000 and would only get back about half that. If you sold today, yes, she said. But Barbara, you've been paying down a mortgage that built equity in your name. This isn't just lost money. It's real value you own. She paused. And if they can't buy you out, and the house goes into foreclosure, you might be able to purchase it yourself for less. End up owning the whole thing, exactly. That Thanksgiving afternoon, while Jessica was probably posting pictures of her curated table setting, I pulled out my files. The deed, bank statements, 8 years of canceled checks. Every receipt. By the time the sun set, I was no longer just a mother. I was a business partner, and I was done being silent. That night, I wrote a letter, formal, straightforward, exactly how Richard advised. Dear Michael and Jessica, after much thought and consultation with legal counsel, I am writing to inform you that I will no longer be making mortgage payments on the property located at your address. As a 50% co-owner of the home, I have subsidized your housing expenses for the past 8 years, effective immediately. You are now responsible for the full mortgage payment going forward. Additionally, based on legal advice, I am entitled to compensation for your use of the property. You have 2 options. Purchase my 50% ownership share for the current appraised value of $137,500. Begin paying me monthly rent equal to your share of the property costs. You have 30 days to respond. If no decision is made within that time frame, I will proceed with a partition sale, and the house will be placed on the market. Once sold, the proceeds will be divided according to our respective ownership shares. This decision is not personal. It is a necessary step to protect my investment and future. Sincerely, Barbara Coleman, co-owner, property address. I printed the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and dropped it in the certified mail slot that very night. Even though it was a holiday, I wanted to make sure they couldn't pretend they hadn't received it. But I wasn't done. The mortgage payment was set to auto-withdraw in 5 days. First thing Friday morning, I drove to the bank. Janet Williams, my banker for years, smiled when she saw me. Morning, Mrs. Coleman. How can I help you? I need to stop an automatic payment, I said. Which one? The $2,500 monthly transfer to my son's mortgage. Janet looked puzzled. I thought that was his account. Don't you want to double-check with him first? No, I said firmly. I'm a co-owner on the property. I've been covering that mortgage alone for 8 years while they lived there without paying a dime. Janet blinked, then pulled up my transaction history. Mrs. Coleman, you've paid over $200,000. I know. She nodded slowly. I'll cancel the automatic payments. Do you want a note added to your file? Yes, I said. Please document that no future payments are to be made without my written permission. Not even if my son calls asking you to restart them. Understood. I'll take care of that personally. As she processed the stop payment order, a strange feeling came over me. Control. I hadn't felt that in years. Janet looked up. Are you planning to move into the house, since you're a co-owner? I hadn't even considered it, but as she asked, the idea planted itself in my mind. Maybe I should. I'd been paying for that house all along. Why not live in it? That afternoon, I called a locksmith. I need the locks changed on a property I co-own, I said. Can you come Monday morning? As long as you have proof of ownership, he said. I'll have the deed and my ID ready, I replied. By Sunday night, I had everything lined up. The payments were stopped. The letter had been delivered. The locksmith was confirmed. I even began packing a few boxes. If Michael and Jessica thought they could shut me out of the home I'd paid for, they were about to get a very different kind of house call. Monday morning, I got in my car with 2 suitcases, the deed, and every mortgage receipt from the last 8 years. At 10 a.m. sharp, I pulled into the driveway of the house I'd been financing for nearly a decade. Michael's car wasn't there, he was at work. Jessica's was parked out front. The locksmith, a tall man named Tom, greeted me at the front walk. Got the documents. I handed him the deed. He glanced over it, nodded. You're definitely a co-owner. Are you sure you want to do this, Tom? I said calmly. I've been paying for this house for 8 years while being treated like the maid. I'm not taking anything. I'm moving into what's mine. He gave me a small, respectful smile and got to work. At 10:47 a.m., Jessica came running out the front door in her pajamas and robe, panic all over her face. She rushed toward the locksmith. Excuse me, what are you doing? This is my house. Tom glanced at me. I stepped out of my car with the deed in hand. Actually, Jessica, it's my house too, I said evenly. I'm a 50% co-owner, and I've decided to take possession of my property. She froze. I could see the confusion behind her eyes turn quickly to anger. You can't just do this. Michael's going to call the police. Please do, I said calmly, holding out the deed. I'd love for them to see the paperwork showing I've made every mortgage payment for the past 8 years, and that my name is on the title. She went pale. I realized then she had never actually seen the deed. Never thought I had any legal claim. Where are we supposed to go? She asked, her voice cracking, panic rising. For the first time in years, I heard fear in her voice instead of entitlement. You have 30 days to decide, I said. You can buy out my half of the property for $137,500 or start paying me rent. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. We don't have that kind of money. Then perhaps, I said, you should have thought of that before excluding me from Thanksgiving dinner in my own home. Tom handed me the new keys. All set, Mrs. Coleman. Only copies are with you now. I thanked him as he drove off, leaving Jessica standing barefoot in the driveway. She turned back to me, her voice shaking. Barbara, you can't be serious. What about the kids? This is their home. Tyler and Emma are my grandchildren, I said gently, and I love them very much. But they'll adapt to whatever situation you and Michael provide. Children are flexible. Remember, that's what Michael told me when you cut me out of Thanksgiving. I walked past her, unlocked the front door, and stepped inside. The house felt different this time. Not like I was visiting, not like I was intruding, but like I was finally stepping into something that had always been mine. The living room tastefully decorated with my money. The dining room where my chair had sat empty on Thanksgiving. The kitchen where I had washed dishes for people who barely looked me in the eye. Jessica trailed behind me, arms crossed tightly over her robe. Barbara, please, let's talk about this. I'm listening, I said, turning to her. What if we included you more? What if you came for dinner once a week? I raised an eyebrow. You're offering to let me visit the house I own once a week, she winced. I mean, what if we made you feel more welcome? I tilted my head slightly. How much rent are you prepared to pay? Rent, she repeated, stunned. We can't afford rent. We're barely making ends meet as it is. You've been doing just fine, I replied. You've had no mortgage to worry about. But that's over. Your share of this property costs $2,500 a month. That's what you'll need to pay if you want to keep living here. Jessica stared at me like she couldn't believe the words coming out of my mouth. But Michael only makes $60,000 a year. We can't afford that. And there it was. The truth they'd been dancing around for years. They had never been able to afford this house. Not on their own. They'd just gotten used to me covering the bill. Then you need to start looking for housing you can afford, I said flatly. Right on cue, my phone rang. Michael. He sounded frantic. Mom, what the hell are you doing? Jessica just told me you changed the locks. I changed the locks on my house, Michael. The house I co-own and have been paying for. You can't just evict us. We have children. I'm not evicting anyone, I said, voice steady. I sent you a certified letter with your options. You can buy out my share. You can pay me rent. Or we can sell and split the proceeds. That's what co-owners do. Mom, this is crazy. We're family. We are family, I said, but apparently, I'm not family enough for Thanksgiving dinner. So I'm done treating this like a family matter. From now on, it's business. But we can't afford to buy you out. We can't afford rent. Then you'll need to find someplace you can afford. You have 29 days left. Mom, Jessica's crying. The kids are scared. Can't we work something out? I looked around the living room. Jessica was still crying, now sitting on the couch I'd unknowingly paid for. Michael, I said quietly, where was this concern when you shut me out of your lives? When you let Jessica treat me like a maid, when you told me I couldn't use my mortgage payments as leverage. That was different. No, I interrupted. It's exactly the same. You didn't want me as part of the family when it wasn't convenient. Now I'm treating this for what it always was, an unpaid lease. I hung up, turned to Jessica. I'll be staying here tonight. You might want to start checking rental listings. What about the kids' school? She asked through tears. They're friends. This is the only home they've known. Children adapt, I said again, without flinching. And maybe this will teach them how important it is to treat family with respect. Over the next 3 weeks, I watched them scramble. Michael called me every few days. He begged. He offered to include me in more family dinners. He promised things would be different, but it was too late for promises. I had finally learned the difference between love and obligation, between being appreciated and being used. They had never appreciated me. They expected me. The bank's foreclosure notice arrived 18 days after I stopped the payments. Michael and Jessica had tried to cover it, scraped together $800, but the bank wanted the full $2,500 plus late fees. 2 days before the deadline in my letter, Michael called one last time. Mom, he said quietly, we found a 3-bedroom apartment. Rent's $1,200 a month. We need to be out by Friday. That sounds like a more reasonable housing arrangement for your income level, I said. There was a pause. Then finally, I'm sorry, Mom. We're both sorry. We didn't realize how much we depended on you. We should have treated you better. It was the first real apology I'd heard in years. Too late to change the past. but I acknowledged it. I appreciate that, Michael, I said, but this isn't about revenge. This is about making smart choices. You can't afford a $2,500 mortgage. You never could. What happens to the house now? He asked. I'm buying it, I said. Through the foreclosure process. I'll own it outright. And then what? Then I'll live here. In the home I've already paid for, the day they moved out. Tyler came over to hug me, tears in his eyes. Grandma Barbara, he asked, why can't we live here anymore? I knelt down and held his hand. Sometimes adults make decisions. Sweetheart, I said gently, and those decisions have consequences. But you can still visit me anytime your parents say it's okay. This will always be a place where you're welcome. Emma clung to me tightly. I'll miss having you nearby. I'll miss you too, baby, I whispered. But now Mommy and Daddy won't have to worry about money all the time. They'll be less stressed. And that turned out to be true. In a few months, Michael and Jessica seemed calmer. Their new apartment was smaller, but more manageable. They had fewer bills. They started living within their means, and I finally lived in the home I had paid for all along. The pool was mine. The garden was mine. The dining room, it now hosted people who truly appreciated my cooking and my company. Friends from my retirement community came by often. They brought wine, laughter, stories. No one handed me $20 bills. No one told me to stay in the kitchen, and every time I didn't write that $2,500 check, I smiled. I had learned a lesson that cost me nearly $250,000, but it was worth every penny. I don't need to buy anyone's love. I don't need to pay for anyone's approval. And I sure don't need to fund the comfort of people who can't even save me a seat at the table. I'm 72 years old, and for the first time in a long time, I finally said no. Now, when I sit at my own dining table, every seat is filled with people who want me there. That's what family feels like. So that's my story. Thanks for listening. And if you've ever had to cut ties with people who only loved you when it was convenient, just know you're not alone.